Everyone said Miss Eleanor didn't talk anymore. 4 years silent, the nurse warned. She doesn't make eye contact, doesn't respond, just stares at the window and hums sometimes. To most, that meant giving up on trying. But not for Camille, the new caretaker, a 31-year-old black woman who'd been working in elder care for nearly a decade. She knew silence didn't always mean absence. Sometimes it was just someone waiting for the right reason to return. Camille's first day at Briarwood Senior Home was a rainy Tuesday. Most residents gave her warm smiles or sleepy nods, but Miss Eleanor, she didn't even flinch. White hair pinned back neatly, pale blue cardigan, wrinkled hands resting on a faded afghan. She sat by the window like a statue carved from memory, staring into something no one else could see. "Good morning, Miss Eleanor," Camille said softly. "I'm Camille. I'll be helping you from now on." Nothing. Not a blink. Not a sound. Just the rain tapping the glass. Camille didn't mind. She sat anyway. She spoke gently as she helped Eleanor with her lunch, described the weather outside, the smell of the coffee down the hall, the sunflowers blooming in the courtyard. For a whole week, Eleanor never looked at her, but Camille kept talking. Every day, she brought a little something new, a scarf from home, an old jazz song playing softly on her phone, even a short poem she'd written herself. One afternoon, she read aloud from a book Eleanor once loved. They kept her favorites in a box near the chair. Camille's voice filled the quiet space as she read about gardens and daughters and summers past. And then as she turned the page, she noticed something. Eleanor had closed her eyes, not in sleep, but in peace. The next day, Camille came in with a soft yellow shawl. Not flashy, just warm, like the color of afternoon light. "I thought it might feel nice on your shoulders, Miss Eleanor," she said gently. Eleanor didn't respond, of course. But when Camille draped the shawl around her back and tucked it in softly, Eleanor's fingers twitched almost as if adjusting it herself. Camille smiled. "There we go. That's better, isn't it?" That moment, small as it was, felt like the first stone in a bridge. In the break room later, another nurse said, "You know, I stopped trying to talk to Eleanor. She doesn't even know where she is most days." Camille just shrugged. "Maybe. But maybe she knows more than she lets on." Every day, Camille kept the rhythm, brushing Eleanor's hair, reading short stories aloud, playing old Ella Fitzgerald records, talking about the breeze, the birds, the smell of fresh sheets. She never waited for replies. She just trusted they were landing somewhere deep inside. One morning, while tidying Eleanor's nightstand, Camille found an old photograph tucked inside a faded book of hymns. It showed a young Eleanor, smiling eyes, shining, standing in a field of daisies, holding the hand of a little girl with braids. Camille paused. "Is this your daughter?" Still nothing, but something in Eleanor's face seemed softer. As Camille cleaned, she placed the photo in a small frame and set it next to Eleanor's chair by the window. That afternoon, as sunlight poured through the glass, Camille noticed Eleanor staring at the frame. Not blankly, but as if searching. "It's a beautiful memory," Camille said. "She looks like she adored you." And for a brief second, something flickered across Eleanor's face. A tremor of recognition, maybe even grief. It was the first change Camille had seen, and it filled her with quiet hope. Camille started bringing in daisies, fresh ones when she could, silk ones when she couldn't. She placed them in a small vase, beside the photo of Eleanor and her daughter. Every time she walked in, she greeted Eleanor the same way. "Morning sunshine. Look what I brought today. Daisies just like in your photo." Still no words from Eleanor. No nod, no smile. But she looked at the daisies every time. Camille noticed, and that was enough. On Tuesday, Camille brought in a new book, not for Eleanor, but for herself. She read to Eleanor while doing her hair, painting her nails, even while folding laundry nearby. Poems, little essays, sometimes things she'd written on scraps of napkins at lunch. She spoke like they were best friends sharing thoughts, even though one of them hadn't spoken in years. "Do you know," Camille said one afternoon, as she brushed Eleanor's hair, "I used to think I wasn't good enough to be a writer. But then I realized, when I talk to you, it's the most honest writing I've ever done." Eleanor didn't move, but her hand curled ever so slightly around the armrest of her chair. That night, Camille went home, thinking about what it meant to be seen, really seen, even by someone who never said a word. She pulled out her journal and wrote, "Today Miss Eleanor gripped the chair when I read my poem. I think it meant something. I think I'm getting closer." The next day, Camille arrived with a folded piece of music, an old hymn Eleanor's file said she used to sing at church. She played the melody softly on her phone, humming along, as she gently rubbed lotion into Eleanor's hands. The hands didn't flinch, but they didn't pull away either. Then, as the last line played, "When peace like a river attendeth my way," Eleanor blinked. A single tear rolled from the corner of her eye. Camille leaned in. "It's all right. You remember. It's still in there." It was the first visible emotion Eleanor had shown in years. Camille didn't say anything more. She just stayed by her side, humming softly, until the sun dipped behind the clouds. Camille didn't tell the other staff about the tear, not because she doubted it happened, but because it felt sacred, private, like a fragile bridge forming between two distant shores. Instead, she stayed the course. Each day, Camille sat with Eleanor like clockwork. Weather reports, poems, gentle questions with no expectations. But now the silences between them felt different, less like absence, more like listening. Eleanor still hadn't spoken, but her reactions were changing. Her eyes followed Camille more. Her hands sometimes twitched in rhythm when Camille hummed old songs. One Friday afternoon, as Camille read a passage about a garden blooming after a long winter, Eleanor blinked hard. Then she turned slowly toward the window. Camille followed her gaze. Out in the courtyard, the maintenance crew had just planted spring tulips. "You see that?" Camille whispered. "New life, right on time." Eleanor blinked again. Her fingers moved faintly, as if reaching or maybe remembering. Camille smiled. "They're not daisies, but they're trying." That evening, Camille stayed late. She stood at the nurse's station, updating Eleanor's chart. Under behavioral notes, she wrote, "Increased awareness, greater response to environment, possible emotional memory recall." But she paused before signing it. Something about that wording felt too clinical for what was happening. She added, "Also, today." She looked at spring like someone who had been waiting to see it again. Later that weekend, Camille came in on her day off, just to sit beside Eleanor for an hour. She brought a small speaker and played quiet gospel music, the kind Miss Eleanor used to sing long ago. Camille rested her hand gently on Eleanor's and said, "You don't have to talk to be heard. I'm listening even in the quiet." And for the first time, Eleanor turned just her eyes, but her whole face toward Camille. No words, but presence, and that was everything. The next week, Camille arrived with something special. It was a recording, not music, not a poem, but a voicemail from her own grandmother. Years old now, but she still kept it. Her grandmother had passed the year before, and Camille often listened when she needed comfort. She placed her phone gently on Eleanor's lap and pressed play. The voice on the recording was warm, southern, and full of love. "Hey, baby girl. Just wanted to hear your voice. Don't forget sugar loves louder than anything, even silence. I love you." Camille wiped a tear as the message ended. "I thought you might like her," she said. "You two have the same kind of quiet strength." For a long moment, Eleanor sat still. Then, almost imperceptibly, her hand slid over the phone. She didn't press play again, didn't say a word, but she held it there. And for Camille, that was enough. That same afternoon, Camille asked the facility director if she could shift her schedule to spend more time with Eleanor. "I don't know what's happening," Camille said, "but I think she's trying to come back." The director nodded. You've made more progress in 1 month than anyone's made in 4 years. Camille didn't see it as progress. She saw it as relationship, trust, earned slowly, layer by layer. One morning, Camille came in humming as usual, reading aloud. As she unpacked Eleanor's tray, she almost missed it. A sound so faint, she thought it was her imagination. She turned quickly. Eleanor was still staring at the photo of her and her daughter. Camille knelt beside her and whispered, "Did you say something?" Silence. Then, a whisper, barely audible, but unmistakable. "Daisy." Camille blinked. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Eleanor's lips moved again. "Daisy," she repeated, softer but clearer. Camille gasped, not from surprise, but from recognition. She glanced at the photo. "The little girl, she's Daisy," Camille asked, voice trembling. Eleanor gave the slightest nod. It was the first word she'd spoken in years, and it was the name of the one she missed the most. Camille didn't say anything at first. She was too stunned, too moved, too afraid that if she spoke, the moment would break like glass. But Eleanor had said it. Not a cry, not a sentence. Just one soft word. Daisy. The name of her daughter. The child in the photo. The little girl with braids in the daisy field. Camille knelt beside Eleanor's chair, her heart pounding in her chest. "Miss Eleanor," she whispered, holding the woman's hand gently. That was beautiful. Eleanor didn't speak again that day, but she kept her hand wrapped around Camille's. Her eyes didn't return to the window. They stayed focused on Camille's face, her voice, her warmth. Camille stayed longer than usual that afternoon. She didn't want the moment to fade. She hummed hymns, told stories, even gently recited Eleanor's favorite poem by Langston Hughes, "Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly." Eleanor's eyes fluttered closed, but not in exhaustion, in peace. As Camille left that night, she stopped by the nurse's station. Her voice was still shaky. She said her daughter's name. She remembered. The head nurse's eyes widened. "She hasn't spoken a word, and..." "I know," Camille interrupted softly, "but I think she was waiting for someone to believe she still could." Word spread around the facility. Some staff members dismissed it as a fluke, but Camille knew better. She'd felt the change in the air. She returned the next day with a purpose. She printed out photos of daisies. She found old records Eleanor once loved. She even asked the kitchen to prepare the lemon pudding that Eleanor's daughter used to bring her on Sundays. And slowly, almost invisibly, Eleanor began to shift. She didn't speak often, but she responded. A nod, a look, a whisper, a touch, and Camille was there to catch every moment, every thread of memory, every fragile, beautiful piece of a woman, finding her way back. Spring turned into summer. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Briarwood. And with each passing day, Eleanor came further into the light. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. Camille noticed subtle changes. Eleanor began to hum softly. When Camille played music, she started reaching for her spoon on her own, instead of needing help with every bite. But the most powerful change, she began to say Camille's name. It happened one quiet morning. Camille was folding a blanket on Eleanor's bed, humming gently to herself when she heard it. A whisper. "Camille." She froze, turned slowly. Eleanor's lips were parted. Her eyes locked with Camille's, more alert than they'd ever been. "You remembered my name," Camille said, her voice cracking. Eleanor blinked slowly, as if to say, "Of course I did." It was the second word Camille had ever heard from her, and it hit harder than the first, because this one wasn't tied to the past. It was tied to the present, to her. Camille reached for Eleanor's hand, and for the first time, Eleanor gripped it with purpose. Not reflexively, not weakly, but like someone holding on to something real. Later that afternoon, Camille sat in the staff lounge, trying to find the words to describe it all in her journal. She knows me now. She may not know what day it is, or where she is, but she knows me. And that means more than anything else in this world. That evening, she brought Eleanor outside to the courtyard, where real daisies were now blooming. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Eleanor whispered something barely audible. "Sunshine?" Camille turned. "What was that, sweetheart?" Eleanor looked at her. "You bring the sunshine." And just like that, Camille felt her chest swell with tears. This woman who had once been locked away behind silence and fog was now choosing connection, choosing her. And in that moment, under the afternoon sun and the scent of daisies blooming, it was Camille who felt like the one being healed. By late summer, Camille and Eleanor had become the heart of the Briarwood facility. Other staff started spending more time with the residents, inspired by the transformation they saw. Families of patients asked about Camille, curious how she'd reached someone they thought was long gone. But Camille always said the same thing: "I didn't reach her. I just waited for her to come back." On warm Friday afternoon, Eleanor's daughter, Daisy, arrived unexpectedly. She hadn't visited in nearly 2 years, not since her mother had stopped recognizing her. She walked into the room, nervous guilt heavy on her shoulders. But what she saw left her speechless. Her mother, her silent, still mother, was sitting up in her chair, a daisy tucked behind her ear, smiling faintly at Camille. As they listened to music together, Daisy froze in the doorway. Camille turned. "You must be Daisy," she said gently. Tears filled the daughter's eyes. She hasn't looked like this in years." Camille rose and stepped aside. Eleanor turned her head. Her eyes met her daughter's, and then in a voice soft but unmistakable, she whispered, "My girl." Daisy fell to her knees. "Mom." Eleanor blinked, her hand slowly lifting. Camille stepped back, letting the moment unfold. It was sacred. A reunion not just of bodies in a room, but of souls finding each other again, across time, pain, and memory loss. That evening, after Daisy left, with tear-stained cheeks and promises to return, Camille sat beside Eleanor again. "You did something beautiful today," she said. "You gave your girl a piece of you back." Eleanor didn't reply. She didn't need to. She just rested her hand gently over Camille's, and in that touch was every word she couldn't say. The next day, Camille added one last line to her journal. "Sometimes healing isn't about fixing the mind. It's about waking the heart." If this story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. Subscribe for more true emotional stories of connection, resilience, and love. And don't miss the next video, because the smallest acts of kindness can awaken even the quietest souls.